This is the Soul-Filled Sisterhood podcast, and I'm your host, Nicole Burgess, licensed marriage and family therapist and an empowerment mentor for women. The information shared in this podcast is not a substitute, nor is it to convey professional, psychological, financial, or medical advice. If you could use such services, please seek them out from someone you trust. Now here is today's episode. Episode 20. Today's episode is sponsored by Nicole Burgess, who is an empowerment mentor. She helps the highly sensitive, the introverted, the intuitive, and/or spiritual woman in breaking free from the good girl facade and blaze her own soul-filled trail. Schedule your discovery call today. Go to NicoleBurgessCoaching.com. Hi, sisters. Hey, before I launch into the episode where I'm speaking with Marissa Lawton, I just want to reflect what I learned from her during our conversation. And it's a little longer than some of my other episodes because we go kind of all in different directions. And that is, I was so curious about her life, where she is right now, not just being, being an Army spouse, but also being a mompreneur that she is, where she's understood kind of being more of an ambivert. But the courage and the bravery she has as she's sharing through some of the vulnerability pieces of her life and her journey, from where she has been to where she is now, but also the risk taking that she does. So if you go back and you're listening to some of the other episodes, I talk quite a bit about that self-reflection, right? It really comes down to mindset. And that's what a lot of coaching and mentoring is to help you when you really want to up-level your life. It's being able to shift your mindset, because those old beliefs, like I talked about in episode 17, really can keep you stuck or hold you back. So I hope you enjoy our conversation today and just really listen into another sister and where she's been, where she's going, and all the incredible things that she is doing out in the world. Well, welcome, sisters. I am so excited about this conversation today. I have Marissa Lawton, who is a licensed counselor, national board certified counselor, and a member of the American Counseling Association on today. She is also an avid content marketer and lights up partnering with female clinicians to build, grow, and scale their private practices through strategic and authentic online marketing. Marissa is the creator of Cathartic Marketing, an insight-oriented meets solution-focused group experience that helps therapists build a brand, find their target market online, and generate on-brand content that speaks directly to their ideal clients. She is transforming traditional marketing techniques into those that work for and are ethical for therapy practices. And in our conversation today, I'm going to talk about, how her journey as a mompreneur, because she's got kiddos and she has her own business, and her insights into being an extroverted person, but really a little more of an introversion is coming out. So I'm so excited about our conversation today, Marissa.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. This is something I've been looking forward to.
Well, I would love if you would share just a little bit more with our audience, like really what got you into, one, being like a counselor, but now you've kind of got this other business going on where you're doing more content marketing for psychotherapists.
Yeah, it was a zigzaggy journey. So my undergrad is actually from a top 20 business school where I studied finance, and then I also studied marketing as well. But so I have a glorified math degree, which I know you and I were talking briefly before we started about knowing your numbers. And I definitely bring numbers into the content strategy that I do with clinicians. But so I learned basically about how to, short cotton and sell stocks and all of that stuff. It has nothing to do with counseling or mental health. And then at the same time, my high school sweetheart and we were kind of off and on during undergrad. He was in the Army, and he deployed to Iraq twice. And in the middle of his second Iraq deployment, he got orders to Alaska. And Yeah, we had this long conversation because at first we were Arizona to Texas. So it was easy to have a long distance relationship, and it was easy to fly back and forth every other weekend or whatever. But to Alaska, that just wasn't possible. So we ended up getting married, spur of the moment. Sounds nuts to anybody who's not affiliated with the military, but it's very common. So then we found ourselves in the middle of nowhere, Alaska, where there was no Lehman Brothers or no PricewaterhouseCooper or no job prospects for me. So that is when I say, like, I went through my quarter life crisis.
I like that. It's a good term. Yeah.
So I found a book called The Success Principles. It's by Jack Canfield. And one of the things that it had you kind of exploring was, what is something that you have always done since you were a child? Like, you're going through your strengths and your skills and all this stuff. And I remember even, like, you know, middle school, friends were calling and like, my boyfriend, quote unquote, broke up with me. What do I do? What do I say? How do I approach the situation? And so I was always that person for my friends, for everybody, even for some of my family members, which probably was inappropriate, but whatever. So, through that, I just did a lot of exploration, and I came across becoming a counselor. At the same time, like I said, zigzaggy, I always knew I'd be an entrepreneur. So I was like, well, how do you have your own business with this? And I was like, oh, well, obviously private practice. So for a long time, my main focus was, you know, getting my degree, getting my license, and then opening a private practice. However, when you move every 18 months to 3 years, starting a practice is really hard. The longest place we've been is 4 years. And we'll move from here at 23 months. So we won't even quite make it 2 years here. So it's just private practice in a brick and mortar location is just not in my cards right now.
And I know with our licensing, right, every state is slightly different within the rules, regulations. So it makes it very challenging as a licensed psychotherapist, no matter what, whether it's the MFT, professional counselor, whatever, there's hoops that you have to go through as well.
Yes. Fortunately, the previous administration made a lot of headway for military spouses. And this goes for teachers, for hairdressers, anyone who has to have a license. We often have a status for military spouses that allows us reciprocity kind of to fast track. We still have to go through all the hoops. Yeah, we still have to go through all the hoops. And if we need more education or more hours or whatever, we still have to do that. But the administrative side tends to be fast tracked for us.
Awesome. Good to know.
But when I moved to Texas from Georgia, I was 9 months pregnant. So it was like, okay, have a baby, get reciprocity, work out of the home, all of this. It was nuts all at the same time. And then I also, I had a 2.5-year-old, so I didn't want to just bring this new baby home and then go to work and leave her not knowing what the hell just happened. So I decided to take a year off, and about 8 months into that year, I was going absolutely nuts. So last August is when I started thinking about opening another online business.
And you and I, when we were first chatting too, we were talking a little bit about being an extrovert, because I know online, I've been in various groups of yours and watched different trainings from you and all of that. And it's just like, oh man, she's more of an extrovert. And yet at the same time, when we were talking before this, that you were noticing really a kind of a shift. And sometimes I call it like a season where things are starting to change for you. Like, hey, yeah, I am an extrovert, but I'm really liking some of the solitude and quiet time. So tell us a little more about that journey that's been going on.
Yeah. So something I've recently come across is like an ambivert, which is somebody who like is extroverted in public, but introverted at home. And I think that would absolutely be me. If it's like I say, if I need to put my face on or whatever, like a party, or if we're at a army event for my husband, like I have no issues going out, shaking hands, meeting people, introducing myself, introducing my family. Like I'm not shy at all. But when I'm home, like I want quiet. If there's too many, like a TV on and a this and a kid and a whatever, I have to leave the room. So I'm finding that when it's time for me to recuperate, I like to do that in very introverted, like traditionally introverted ways, reading a book, sitting in a quiet room, even like laying in bed with the light off, like those types of things are what I like to do when I'm alone.
So how do you help, like when you're not alone, if your husband is away and you've got your kiddos there, how do you help manage that as a mom of being able to have some of the quiet time and also teach your kids, right, that mom needs some downtime or quiet time as well, even though you're there to help make sure they're okay and their needs are met and all that? How do you manage that?
Yeah, I think most moms will agree that kids act different with whatever parent they're with. So if it's my husband helps out tremendously when he is home. But if they're with him, they're even more rowdy. With, with me, I kind of like, I will just sit on the couch and in a very still loving way, but I kind of ignore them.
Yeah.
If I ignore them for long enough, they'll go off and they'll play. And it's not that I'm not acknowledging them and it's not that I'm not present, but when they want to play, I'll say, well, why don't you take it over there and play? And eventually after 3 or 4 times of redirecting, they'll kind of get the point. And my baby is now 16 months and my daughter is just almost 4. They're 2.5 years apart. So they're just starting to almost kind of play together now.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah. So I think in the next year or so that will get much better.
Yeah.
And my 4-year-old is a complete introvert. She takes after her dad, and she's starting now to like go in her room and play. She'll shut the door. She'll turn the light on. She'll bring all her toys out in her room. So she wants her own space as well, even only at 4.
I find that interesting too, that you just mentioned that your husband is an introvert, and with usually what everything is required in the Army, it's like that. I hope he has a job that allows him to have some of that, what I want to say, kind of quiet, productive space. Yeah. So he's not on the go all the time or out and about in front of everybody all the time.
Well, it's hilarious because we were high school sweethearts. So we've known each other for 16 years now, 15 years now, 15 years now. I look over and I make sure I got that right. And so in a sense, we've gone from 16 and 19 to now 31 and 34. We've seen each other grow up, and we've almost switched roles. Whereas he was really introverted younger, some of his job with Army and like you just mentioned has had to bring him out of his shell more. So he's become more extroverted as he's aged, and I've become more introverted as I've aged.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
What a beautiful journey together, too, to be able to acknowledge that within one another and really support one another in this due to all your relocations and you having the insight as well to say, hey, I can't do the traditional kind of brick and mortar, but you still having the entrepreneur kind of bug sometimes, right? It's like, I want to have my own business. I want to be able to also do something besides just being at home with my kiddos. It's being able to have both, right? And I think sometimes for women, they forget it's like there's still that thought process as well. If you're a mom, you need to be just a mom, right? And it's like, oh, that's only one role. And those women who want to also work, sometimes they get, what do I want to say? They get looked upon as if somehow there's something wrong with them if they want to do both. Or if they even choose not to have children, right? There's that other element too. But I love how you were like, nope, I can do both of these. And again, create more of the online business so that it stays with you as you guys truly move across the country at various times. I love that.
Yeah. It's interesting because I grew up with a single mom. And my mom was, I think, she was the first in her family to graduate from college.
Go mom. Woohoo.
Yeah. So, and she went to law school. She didn't finish law school, but she started law school in the 70s. And I always saw her working. She had to work. It wasn't like she chose had to work, but she still, she went from working she's worked at the same community college for 20 some years, and she's actually retiring in September.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, which she's freaking out about. But I saw her when I was 5, when my parents split up. She got divorced from my dad, and she got a job in just the library of this community college, and now she's an assistant dean. So, yeah. So not only did she always have to work, she was progressive, and she wanted to move up in a career, not just, make money. So that was really influential on me.
Yeah, I was sitting there just thinking, I'm like, man, what a role model to have, not just your mom, but really a female, role model, a person of inspiration to watch her go, okay, I can do both of these. And one, like you said, it's like not having necessarily a choice of, I can't not work. I need to work to provide for my family. And then also saying, but I also don't need to settle in this one type of position. I can continue to advance and grow. And again, it's really helping kind of think outside the box, which obviously that has definitely, impacted you as well through the years. And then also moving around with the Army as well. Really, it does challenge that creativity piece of like, okay, how can we do this that's not just the typical? Because you can't. It doesn't fit that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And you brought up something really interesting as well, too, because the Army is one of the only occupations like that you can really have a thriving family on one income. And so a lot of the spouses, traditionally wives, but there are more and more male spouses, stay home because they don't necessarily need to work. And so I've lost friends because I've wanted to build a business, or I've wanted something more. Yeah. So it's a really interesting dynamic.
Well, and I think, again, that's a beautiful point to really, I guess, emphasize here, right? This whole podcast is all about women really building one another up versus kind of the old system where there's that jealousy or putting one another down because, they're doing this or they're doing that. It's like there's truly enough to go around and supporting one another. If you've got disagreements, okay, great. And if you really, that you're like, no, I can't imagine my husband staying home while I'm out working, or having that drive to do that. It's like, if that's not your cup of tea, totally fine. But if it is, it's like, don't shy away from that. Stay connected, because that really being there for one another and saying it's okay to, again, break through these old traditional mindsets that we can make all of this happen.
Yeah, I think it's really important. And that's why I teach such authenticity, in my business, is to be in touch with who you are. So many, like going to the therapist thing, like a lot of the people I work with, they think, well, I have to be full, and full is, 30 clients. I'm like, well, but what is your idea of full? And a lot of times they're like, I would love to be full with like 12 or 15 clients. And then in the other hours of my day, I'd be doing this and that and this and that. So tuning in and that authenticity piece is huge for not only, building the business that you want to build, but also just for living the life that you want to live.
Right. And I think that is so important, because anytime we're disconnected from ourselves and trying to play the game of, well, so-and-so on Pinterest does this, or so-and-so on Facebook does this. It's like, yeah, but you're not them. Be you.
Right.
And I know that's a message. Oftentimes people hear like, I get it, I'll be authentic, be me. What does it mean? It's like, well, that means to slow down. It means to truly tap into what does call you, like you're saying with your clients that you work with. It's like, let's explore that. What if in an ideal world for you, creating your unique business that is all you, what would that look like?
Yep.
And then it's really kind of, once you get that idea or that kind of framework, then it's backing into the numbers, right? Saying, okay, what numbers do I need to be able to sustain that and to support my family or to support myself, whatever that may be. And then you keep taking those steps in that direction then.
Yeah, I completely agree. And something else to just think about is like, when you are comparing yourself to somebody on Facebook or on Pinterest, which I do every day, I'm not above that, but you have to remind yourself that you're seeing their highlight reel.
Yes.
You sit in the middle of your behind the scenes, right?
Yes.
Like I'm looking out at my living room right now. My daughter's high chair is in the living room. There's an explosion of Paw Patrol things. And it's like, but when I record my videos for either the live or my weekly videos, I have my camera turned so that you don't see the playroom, because you guys don't want to see my playroom, right?
Right.
So it's like what I am choosing to put on camera. If you just looked 6 inches to the left, you'd see my reality.
Right. And I think that's an important piece to keep in mind as well, because it's like just those small little shifts of the perception of the angle or the perceptive piece of that, the camera. It's like things change, but yet you also, when you're watching somebody, right, you're watching a professional, you're watching an expert, you want to see them kind of in that light. And so it's this balance, right? Because I'll see different things within different groups that I'm in. They're like, well, why don't people keep it real? Why don't they show their messiness? It's like, well, there are times when you can share that. And then other times you have to share, well, and here's what I do professionally, and making that more of trying to stay real with people and at the same time be professional, right? And it can be a hard balance, because you're like, well, if you just want the messy, then you may view that differently if I show you the unmessy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I have a few points on that. Something that I help people do when they're marketing online, especially, like consumers today want transparency. I used this analogy inside my group the other week, and it really seemed to resonate, where it was, on Wizard of Oz, right? Where Toto pulls the curtain back and you see that the wizard is just a man. And you're like, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Well, businesses used to be run that way. It didn't matter who the actual owners were. It didn't matter who the operators were. It was just the face of the brand. Well, now more and more and more people want to see the transparency. People want to know who they're buying from, not just what they're buying. And so when you're marketing, you want to show a little bit of yourself. But then when you're talking about therapists, we have an ethical boundary called self-disclosure, right? So that's a really fine line for us where other business models don't have to even pay attention to that. They can show what they're eating for lunch or whatever behind the scenes, their feet up on their desk, they can show that stuff. And so that's something that I help people balance, is how can you show behind the scenes of your practice or behind the scenes of you, so people know that, you're the therapist they want to open up to, but still do it according to, your ethical regulations and whatever associations you answer to or whatever.
Yeah. And thank you for that clarification, because that's absolutely right. I guess in my own therapy mind at that moment, I had that hat on. I'm like, well, we can't disclose all that stuff. And that is due to, our ethical guidelines that we have. Whereas what you're saying, other types of businesses, they don't have that same standard. And so it does look different. So we have to get really strategic with, okay, how can we use these trends that people want to see, but still, be ethical and be mindful of the way that our profession is different. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I'd love to kind of turn this just a little bit. Yeah. And I'm curious, what are you hoping to really kind of, I guess, both, maybe it's you and your husband, and I know he not necessarily maybe speaking for him, I guess, but what are you both kind of hoping to really role model to your children, being this entrepreneur and being able to move wherever the Army tells you to move? What are you hoping they kind of glean from all the insights that both of you are learning along this journey?
Yeah. So Josh actually has 7 years left. And for a civilian, that sounds again like a lifetime. But for us, that means like 2 more moves, 1 or 2 more moves. He's finishing his bachelor's and in the middle of, getting his master's, and he wants to teach.
Cool.
But he also has seen, my success with entrepreneurship, and he has a few business ideas that he wants to float around. Something that we talk about is like that, leaving that legacy for our kids. Everybody wants their kids to have a better life than they did, And entrepreneurship is in his family's blood as well. His dad is a professional baker and does wedding cakes and all of those things. And his sister is a professional chef and is a personal chef. Yeah. So something that we envision is, having our kids like work the counter in our business, or, be a receptionist for us or something like that. I think the core values that we want them to learn, especially the Army life, is resilience.
Yeah.
If Josh retires just at 20 years, which there's a question of if we'll do 20 or 25, if he retires at 20, the girls will be 11 and 9, which is like prime middle school age, right? So you have all of that drama, especially for middle school girls. that, we'll be dealing with. And if he does 25, then they'll be, 16 and 14. So that would be high school age. But regardless, when they have birthday parties, we don't always have the same friends to invite from year to year and just that kind of stuff, because we're in a different environment or even a different town, or their friends have moved or we've moved. So being resilient and kind of being able to thrive wherever you are, that concerns me a little bit more for my older daughter, who is more introverted, because I'm seeing now that she does prefer to be kind of with either one friend or one teacher. So that, I think, will be a challenge for her.
Well, and I was going to say, I love the message that you are really teaching them and instilling in them. And I'm imagining the way it sounds like you and your husband, you guys have a lot of conversations, dialogue about what has happened and where you two want the family to kind of go, or what you want to instill within the family. So I'm guessing, and correct me if I'm totally off the mark here, but do you have that same conversation, especially with your oldest? I get, she's not very, very old yet, but really trying to share with her about it's okay to have that one friend. And there are going to be times where, it's okay to grieve and feel sad too when you move and shift again, and how she's so capable of making new friends and companions. And that pretty soon as she's older, right, with our technology age, she can stay in contact with those when you guys have moved virtually, kind of like what you and I've talked about, right?
Yeah, we've talked about all of those things. Something that I think is so interesting is, obviously it's summer, so she's just in a little summer program that she goes to every morning. But last year she was in 3-year-old preschool, right? 3-year-old preschool.
Wow.
And they complained about my kid almost every day. And some of my clients and my friends, when they hear the story, they'll probably be like, yeah, I remember you talking to me about that. Because it was something that I would go into like these other therapist groups for moms or whatever and ask, like, what is going on here? Am I totally off base because my clinical brain is saying one thing and then my mom heart is saying another, But she was already being pushed to be more extroverted than she is.
That makes my heart sad. Oh.
Yeah. Our society values or even just emphasizes extroversion so much more than introversion. And so when she wanted to go read a book, and my daughter's 3 and she can read, she's she'll be 4 in just a couple weeks. So I'm kind of bouncing between those two numbers, but she's just nearly a 4-year-old, and she reads those beginning reader books, like Finding Dory. Dory is blue, right? Like that, but she's reading. And there's other kids in that class that might have been more social or might have been more, more engaging. And yet they were nowhere near where she was cognitively or academically. But every day they would be like, well, she didn't do this. She didn't do that. She's not really having a lot of friends. She's not, when we ask her questions in circle time, she doesn't like to raise her hand. And I'm like, but what is she doing? So she, I just am as supportive and as one-on-one with her. I get on her level as much as I can. All of those things, that she is who she is, and she's wonderful the way she is.
Yeah. And I love the advocating that you do for her in this little preschool or the camps, that it's embracing that temperament and or her sensitivity versus trying to make her be somebody she's not, because then that's where you get the anxiety and the depression that can really start to show up because they're so outside their own self. And really allowing her to embrace who she is, and just you also as her mom, her parent, really letting that shine through too by really reflecting that back to her. That's great.
I think that has been my biggest lesson of becoming a mom. And if I hadn't had the mom I had, I don't know if I'd learned it. And that is advocacy.
Yeah.
Because I can remember distinctly times of her, like I wore my pajamas to school, like they're completely appropriate pajamas, like pants, but they had like moons and stars on them. And my mom's getting calls from the principal, and she's like, is her butt covered?
Yeah.
Okay. Is she going to class on time? Then shut up and don't call me at work because my kid's wearing pajamas, right?
Right.
But I've had to do those same things, and I just think I never imagined I'd be doing it at 3 years old.
Well, and again, Marissa, I think it's so truly incredible and such an inspiration that for you and your husband, as much as you have moved around and embraced army life, you've created, your online businesses, you are raising two kiddos, you've had this role model of a mom really embracing it's being ambitious and a hard worker and still keeping, in tune with your children and learning as an extrovert, going more towards the ambivert now, but also saying it's okay for my kiddo to be more of an introvert, to allow her to really just shine through to whatever temperament that she is, that it's all okay instead of trying to, take that out of her and be something, different. So that's a very beautiful thing in this journey that you and your husband and your family are on. I love it.
Yeah. Well, it is a challenge. I'm not going to say
Oh,
it's
yeah.
not. Because my younger daughter, she's only, like I said, she's not even a year and a half. She will be on stage. Like that girl, she's like a clone of me personality wise, where my older daughter is a clone of my husband. So there are some times where I do defer to Josh and I say, I think that I need to understand this from your point of view, because I probably would push my older daughter a little bit more than I do, because what's normal for me is always raising my hand in class and always having the answer, or always, sitting in that front seat and wanting to be front and center. That's so natural to me.
And I'm sorry, I'm giggling because I'm thinking, going, oh, I know who you were in that classroom.
Yeah. But we haven't even hit on this yet, but some of that stuff is family of origin stuff. Some of that stuff is perfectionist stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't want to repeat the same family of origin patterns for my daughter. I don't want to carry some stuff generationally for her. So I do defer to Josh a lot. And I say, Josh will be the first to admit, he's like, I didn't raise my hand in class until I was in college.
Yep.
So he's like, I did just fine. I had my one or two friends and I did. So I always kind of ask him when I'm struggling with, is this normal? Because normal for him or normal for somebody more introverted might be different than what was normal for me as a child.
And I love that. And if we do tap in more into like your family of origin stuff, you doing the work to getting an understanding more of yourself and kind of the patterns, the generational pieces of it. But I love, again, it's you seeking out. It's like, I don't have to be what I want to say, like, right. I don't have to do everything just perfectly as a parent, because one, you can't, right? We're humans. We are totally imperfect, but seeking out, like, how is that different for you? Because I totally can resonate with what Josh is saying. It's like, yeah, I had a handful of friends, only raise my hand, if called upon type of thing. And it was till much, much later on that's like, oh, now I can do this. And it's just letting her bloom as she, blooms at her own time. And that you as a mom is more of that extrovert saying, oh, I see this. And that's where you get to learn. That's, I think, the beauty of children are, right? They really do teach parents a lot and going back and forth. So, yeah.
It's like looking in a mirror that you don't necessarily want to look at. You can't walk away because it's your kid. But sometimes you're just like, I don't want to know this about myself.
Yeah. And if you don't mind, would you share a little more about like some of the things you have learned by doing your own work regarding looking at your family of origin? You had talked about it before we started to really record, about some of the insights you've gleaned by doing that.
Yeah. So a few of the things that you've said, even just in our talk, probably a few years ago would have been triggering. And I'm trying to move past that, and I'll explain in a moment. But so my parents divorced when I was 5. I have 2 older sisters, but they're a decade older than me. So I have a lot of youngest child tendencies, but I also have a lot of only child tendencies. One of my sisters and I don't talk. And one of my sisters and I are great when we're in person, but we don't have a relation, and it's just the distance. It's the army stuff. If I still lived in my town, we'd probably hang out, but we don't really talk often just because we don't live anywhere near each other. And then my dad, I had visitation with him. So I saw him every other weekend growing up. There, sometimes where he did a training for 3 months and one summer I didn't see him and stuff, but it was never he wasn't necessarily an absent father. But neither of my parents were the type of parents that got on your level, that said, that tried to understand the world from your angle or like your perspective or any of that stuff. So the things like when you were mentioning, well, your mom, she did great doing both things. I'm like, well, actually, she didn't really do both things. She provided, but she didn't parent. And my dad was a best friend, but never a parent. You know, he was like a buddy, but never a parent. That's one of the things that I try and do is that balance of, yeah, I'm striving for me and I have monetary goals I want to hit and I have an impact I want to make on the people I work with and all of those things. But I do still want to be that active parent.
Yeah.
So striking that balance. And it's hard because it was never modeled to me.
Yeah.
But I think why I was so extroverted as a kid and why now that I am in a stable, you know, I've worked a lot on my own attachment and things like that, that more of my introvert tendencies are coming out now is because I think so much of my extroversion was just attention-seeking behavior. It was, you know, I'm not getting the attention from my parents. So how can I be outgoing? How can I get straight A's? Because if I get straight A's at school, I get attention. And it wasn't always positive attention either. I did a lot of negative attention-seeking behavior as well. But the wanting to be on stage, the performing, the getting good grades, all of that stuff, I think it was just me seeking approval and seeking attention from other people because I wasn't getting it at home.
Yeah. And that makes absolute sense when, again, you slow it down and really dive deep into that and explore that. And I appreciate you also letting me know it's like being mindful of not jumping to that conclusion, right? That your mom was able to do both. That for you, you're like, nope, she did this part really well. She didn't necessarily have the skills to do the parenting piece really well.
Yeah.
And I think that's also, remembering that, you know, for all of the listeners out there, if you're like, okay, well, my parent didn't do this and you're unlearning some of those things, look at that. I mean, that's what you were sharing right now is here's what I had growing up. And then really letting that piece go, right? Forgiving and moving forward so that you can create more of that life with your family of doing both pieces, not the one or the other. And I think, again, where we are sometimes in our world, it's really, again, breaking from those old traditional models of saying you can only have one or the other. You're doing both.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not easy. There's a lot of guilt. Like I'm going through my own versions of some mom guilt right now because like my youngest, she goes to daycare already, and I didn't put my oldest in any kind of daycare until she was 18 months, and she was always in someone's home. Usually was like a neighbor up the street, you know, like a much more one-on-one environment, and maybe that's why she struggled when she got to like a real preschool environment was because I don't know. So there's more mom guilt. Like, did I do that wrong? I don't know.
And it's not wrong. It's learning.
Yeah.
Right.
That's very true.
Yeah.
But then my youngest, she started going when she was 14 months. So like 4 months earlier. And I struggled with that. I was like, oh my God, I'm already putting her somewhere and she's already spending time away from me. But I need that time to be in the business because it has grown. I kept her home while she was still on 2 naps. Like she would nap in the morning and then that's when I would work. And then she'd have her afternoon nap. But as soon as she dropped to 1 nap, I couldn't. It just was no way.
Yeah.
So all of those decisions. So I've structured my days so that in the mornings they're at school and I'm just only business. And then in the afternoons, I only, like I said, put out fires. If a client emails me and they're like, I need this now, or what's going on, I'm having like a crisis right now, I may or may not answer that. But if it's like a, hey, just touching base kind of email, then I don't answer it till the next morning. So I've really had to almost compartmentalize. But then when my kids are home, I'm with them. And so it's working right now. It's not as fluid maybe as other people or as I might even like it, but it helps me do both.
Well, but I also think as we've been talking about, right, this has all been a journey. Everything in life is a journey and we learn from it if we're open to learning from it. And it sounds very much like you are. and that you have this relationship with your husband that you two can really bounce things off of one another, hold one another accountable, and you're really creating the best life that the both of you know how to create with what you know at this moment.
Yeah. And I think that's the biggest point. I really, it calms me to hear you say that, because some of those perfectionist tendencies come out for me, and I'm like, but it's not perfect right now.
Yeah. And it won't be.
Yeah. But trying to remember the whole journey aspect, and trying to remember that this week may look different than next week, but how can we maximize this week and make it the happiest, healthiest week? And then when something shifts, we'll just have to adjust to that and make that the happiest, healthiest time. And
yes.
That's what I'm trying to embrace more of.
Yeah. And I think, we talk about like pivoting sometimes, or it's so much of this is continue to go back to the present moment, because that's the only thing we have is this moment. And so when in your mind, when you were being very intentional, when your kiddos are home, you are with them. And that the client stuff, not the necessarily the crisis stuff or whatever, but you've got your parameters that go with that. And it's like, I will get back with them within, my business hours. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, when I'm off, it is off time, because it is truly with my family.
Yeah. And something else I've done is I've hired 2 people, and I never thought I would even hire anybody. Again, perfectionist. I want to do it all myself, and it's my business. But I've now hired 2 people. And so while right now that's more of an expenditure, I'm not necessarily seeing the return on that yet. Mm-hmm. Money wise, I'm seeing the return on that time wise with my family.
Yeah. And that again is the important piece, because you can't get that back. Yeah. The money comes and goes, but you can't get the time back with your family.
Yeah. And I have the 2 people who work for me are clinicians. They're therapists in their own right. And so it makes me feel good, because I'm helping them not only reach their goals financially or whatever, but it's also still within the therapeutic community. So I'm trying to think of all the good that's coming from it, and not just that it's hard for me to let go, and that I'm spending more money than I'm making right now, at least on that part of the business. But I have to think of the return on investment, not only from a financial, but also from just a happiness factor.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Marissa, I truly continue to have this conversation, and I know we're coming up on time here, and I want to be very respectful of that. So would you mind sharing what your website is, and like a good way for people to get a hold of you if they want to find out more, whether it's your website or Facebook page, or how you would like them to be able to find out more about you?
Cool. Yeah. So my website is risslawton.com. My full name wasn't available, or I think the domain was like $500. And I was like, I am not spending that. I'll spend $299. So it's risslawton.com. And I actually kind of created a fun quiz for everybody. I think you have the link to it, so you can kind of share that. But it helps with this strategy and authenticity piece. And what it does is it talks about archetypes, but from a marketing standpoint. You can find out what your marketing archetype is and how to use that personality trait, so that when you're writing a blog post, or when you're writing your website, or whatever it is that you're using for your marketing, feels in line with you.
Beautiful. Well, I'll have all that information on the show notes for sure, so people can see the spelling of it. Click on the link. It'll take you right to her website. Plus also, yes, your online marketing archetype. I love that. Well, thank you so much for coming on today and really sharing so much of your personal journey about where you've been, where you are, and the plans you have going forward. I just so appreciate you being open, Marissa, and I really just appreciate you taking the time.
You're so welcome. I love the way that you talked about the imperfectly human. I think that hopefully some people see my stuff and they think I've got it all together, but it might have only been together for that 10 minutes and 30 seconds.
And that's really everybody, right? Again, behind the scenes there is a lot of messiness in life, and that's just part of our journey. And it's really embracing that and not getting stuck in trying to be somebody else. It's like, just truly be your authentic self, like you're talking about, and keep taking that step forward.
Yeah. So I hope people can see that you can have a business that you enjoy, a family that you enjoy, and it can all be one big mess and all one big beautiful mess.
Yes, yes, exactly. Thank you. Thank you for listening. Do you want to receive episodes directly to your inbox or stay informed on my latest offerings? Then I invite you to go out to NicoleBurgessCoaching.com/podcast, and there is a button for you to sign up for my newsletter. Thank you again.